Muted.
Thank you to everyone for attending today's highly anticipated webinar, Fast Track Your Content Management Roadmap with Cloud Services. We have a large audience in attendance today. The purpose of this webinar is to educate attendees on how cloud is taking enterprise content management into the future. We'd like to see lots of participation from our audience today. Feel free to chat throughout the presentation by using the chat dialog box on your GoToWebinar toolbar. My name is Laura Ziegler, and I'll be your host today. My job is to collect questions that are written throughout the course of the presentation and read them aloud during the Q&A at the end of the presentation. Our speakers today are Cheryl McKinnon with Forrester Research, Toby Bell with IBM, and Jeff Gierlach with IPD. Cheryl is the Principal Analyst at Forrester Research, serving the needs of enterprise architecture professionals. She covers the trends, challenges, and recommended practices for managing enterprise content. Her focus is delivering research and advisory services into areas including enterprise content management, content archiving, enterprise file sync and file share, document-centric collaboration, lifecycle management, information governance, and e-discovery. Before joining Forrester, Cheryl ran an independent consulting firm serving both public and private sector clients. Toby is the marketing and offering strategy lead at IBM. He is a former lead analyst at Gartner and has over 25 years of leadership experience in technology strategy, analysis, development, and delivery. His work history ranges from marketing and communications, software development, and global consulting at Ernst & Young and Arthur Andersen to unstructured data and case management technology research and analysis at Gartner. Jeff Gierlach is the Chief Technology Officer at IPD. Jeff oversees the development and implementation of IPD's enterprise technology, and his portfolio of responsibilities include research and development, customer support, as well as testing and evaluation. Prior to joining IPD, Jeff served as Vice President of Product Development for Vulacity, a global provider of EAI and SCM, and has had responsibilities for all development and support activities in Europe and Asia. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Cheryl, and let's get started. Cheryl? Cheryl, are you there? We're having some audio difficulties. Hold on.
Hi, this is Cheryl. Can you hear me now? Hi, this is Cheryl. Can you hear me now? Great. Thanks, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We were trying to get the unmute buttons repaired. So thanks again for hanging on for the last couple minutes. My name is Cheryl McKinnon with Forrester Research, and let's just move to the next slide so we can get the agenda started. What I want to talk about over the next about 20 minutes or so is just to talk a bit about where we see enterprise content management as part of a really key part of a business technology agenda, and what that means as more and more organizations look to serve their customers, their partners, and of course their internal employees with content and process. We do see that cloud is really becoming a key enabler when it comes to thinking about our content management services for the future. I'll just summarize what it means, and then I'll turn it over to the second guest speaker, Toby Bell with IBM. Next slide. So at Forrester, we have been operating in what we've been calling the age of the customer for the last several years. And there's been 5 key market imperatives that really have been shaping how a lot of enterprises today, both private and public sector, have been making their technology decisions. The first key market imperative is that we see that there's a real requirement to transform that end-to-end customer experience. And for those of you in insurance and financial services, this is an area of really important investment to avoid disruption by newer players. We also see the requirement to accelerate your move into a much more digital way of working. This has been a mandate for many organizations for a number of years now, but doubling down on eliminating paper and manual activities really has become key here, being able to extract the data to kick off more intelligent, interactive processes. It's also key, the third key market imperative, to build out our ability to support the world of mobile and what the role that mobile content plays as we engage and try to make decisions, learn information, get instructions, approve tasks right from our phone or tablet devices. The fourth key market imperative is that we need to turn business insights into action. And what this really means is going beyond the hype and the buzz of big data that we've been talking about for the last few years and really understanding how we can mine and extract all of that locked up information sitting in our documents and use that to really reveal interesting patterns, help us better serve our customers and collaborate with our internal employees. And the fifth and final one, this is the fifth one that we added earlier in 2016, is that we increasingly see that privacy is going to be a market differentiator, and the customers, the enterprises that invest in security technologies, in rethinking some of their business practices to better manage, preserve, and even securely dispose of sensitive information, whether that's security, social security information that we harvest on behalf of our customers, whether that's sensitive intellectual property we share with business partners as part of joint ventures. The respect for our customers' privacy and protecting the valuable information they share with us will increasingly become a differentiator as companies go to market. Next slide. I think this fifth market imperative is particularly important, the ability to protect and manage content, because we see that enterprise boundaries are beginning to shift. When we thought about ECM years ago, it was typically more to support things like back office functions, so we could move documents, papers, forms from step to step as we're approving applications or processing loans. But increasingly now, we see that we want to move into this much more digital way of working. And the people that we want to include in our content and process-centric use cases are now increasingly sitting outside the traditional firewall. That means our partners, our suppliers, and even our customers, perhaps even prospects. We want to engage with them not just by emailing attachments around, but by providing secure, interactive content co-creation zones and be able to manage that information from end to end. Next slide. And of course, enterprise content management services continues to be a key foundational element in any organization's business technology agenda. We know that content drives the communication that we share with our partners, our colleagues, customers. And from an infrastructure perspective, enterprise content management systems form a really important foundational layer as we look at supporting the knowledge-based businesses that so many of us work in today. And of course, because of the nature of the information that we are often collecting, receiving, and creating, we need to make sure that we're applying the right kind of guardrails and guidelines, that governance policies for retention, policies for security and access to the information that we're holding. All right, so let's now talk a little bit about cloud. Cloud really is becoming an important enabler for digital business today. Now let's just start with a few high-level comments on kind of where we see the ECM market overall. First off, we do see that the outlook for investment in enterprise content management technologies is actually healthy into the next coming years. In fact, according to some of our recent 2016 surveys, we see that 87% of current ECM program leaders intend to continue to expand their existing deployment, so that perhaps is new applications out to new lines of businesses or adding new users to existing investments. And interestingly, when we asked our survey participants what the top drivers were for investing in enterprise content management tools, we saw that improved compliance came up as the #1 selection, followed closely by digitization of business processes. We also see that sprawl, in terms of unmanaged, ungoverned SharePoint sites or file shares, has become the top challenge for organizations that are trying to embark on an ECM program. So all of this ungoverned, unmanaged information is in fact becoming a burden to doing better business. And we also see now that organizations, having invested in ECM for a number of years, are now rethinking some of their business cases and are refreshing some of the outcomes that they're hoping to accomplish with some of their ECM investments. So for example, creating a new business case and refocusing outcomes on new objectives, such as better knowledge sharing across the organization, improving customer experience, and of course, improving compliance. Next slide. Now, just to back up some of those comments with the data charts, this again is coming from our fairly recent 2016 panel survey, ECM decision makers, and we do see that regulatory legal compliance is now actually one of the top drivers behind ECM, as it had been several years ago. But in recent years, we had actually seen things like digitization of business, better search, better sharing be some of the top drivers. Next slide. Also, as I mentioned, the sprawl of unmanaged information has actually become kind of the bane of existence for many ECM decision makers. And this is a common theme when I'm talking to enterprise customers as part of our inquiry services. How do I actually get my arms around all of this information? And if we think about cloud as where a lot of organizations are taking their ECM investments, this is really key because information is out there on our file shares, and very often as part of a cloud migration, we need to be able to understand how do we actually clean up this information, how do we move what's really relevant and what we need to keep, and how do we dispose of the information that perhaps has outlived its natural life cycle. So a lot of really interesting opportunity to take advantage of some of the migration and cleanup efforts as part of a planned cloud move. Next slide. So some of the 5 key trends that we're tracking at Forrester that's shaping the direction of ECM are as follows. First off, we do see that this whole extended enterprise, the need to include our partners, suppliers, trusted advisors like contractors or law firms, are actually giving way to new ECM use cases. And one of the reasons that we think cloud is going to be a really interesting enabler here is because we do want to open up access to shared document spaces, include some of these external participants in some of our workflows, and this makes it easier from a technology and access perspective. Next key point, and this is going to be the focus of the bulk of the presentation, is that we do see that the shift to cloud services means rethinking some of our roadmaps. We also know that content and data are there to enrich what we call the mobile moment, so being able to access the data in time. Fourth key trend that we're tracking is that we see that content increasingly is becoming a data source for organizations that are investing in things like analytics to be able to mine and extract some of that information to kick off smarter processes. And of course, we do see that new architectures and new platforms are coming into the ECM market. But today, we're going to focus on the second key trend that we're tracking, this whole shift to cloud services and what it means for ECM roadmaps. Next slide. So we do see that cloud is really an important enabler of digital business. And when we think about some of these new content management, even collaborative use cases, it means that we are looking at sharing information with that extended enterprise. Next slide. When we took a look at the data behind our 2016 ECM survey, we actually did ask the question, so, do you want some kind of external participant to be there in your information systems? And in fact, 61% of ECM decision makers did want some form of external participation. This means a really interesting recognition that customers and citizens are now part of the content and process ecosystems that we've been using internally for a number of years. And it also means that we are seeing evidence that enterprises at last are digitizing their end-to-end supply chains. So as we move into more co-creation activities with contracts, agreements, sharing intellectual property as part of manufacturing agreements, we know that we need to be able to have the single point of the truth in terms of our key documents. Some of the data points behind this, so again, from our 2016 survey, we asked the question, are external users allowed access to your system? And certainly there's a clear body of no. In 2016, 38% will not allow access. But we do see that the remainder have some form of yes. So perhaps it's that trusted ecosystem of consultants, law firms, other trusted service providers at 33%. 18%, but perhaps a purpose-built application just for that scenario. And yes, 10% invited customers and partners. Next slide. We then asked the question, so well, what do you want to do with some of these external participants? And interesting that we saw the top answer is some form of collaboration with contractors, agencies, other trusted business partners, where 31% actually wanted secure sharing of customer or citizen information. And this is a trend I'm hearing also from customers in financial services, insurance markets, that organizations want to move away from kind of clunky web portals for downloading of information. They want to move away from email as the primary channel for communicating with content, and opening up secure document sharing sites for a particular client, for a particular project, and being able to upload and download secure information as required. Next slide. So when it comes to cloud, we do see that this is really a top priority for many of the key vendors in this market. And what we're seeing around the market is several different approaches to how cloud is actually being delivered. We are seeing that many vendors are investing in the data center and managed services they need to be able to host or deliver the applications that their customers rely on. So we do see a range of models in terms of the types of services, the types of licensing and subscription models. So there typically is a model that will fit any number of customer scenarios. We do see that this is encouraging vendors to invest in things like more open APIs and to look at interoperability, recognizing that as more and more content and data moves to the cloud, integration with other cloud applications becomes important. We do, however, see that security and privacy concerns remain an area of ongoing education, but we find that customers are increasingly asking the right questions, involving their security officers, learning how to assess how a particular vendor is offering a cloud-based service, and getting that comfort level to know that the information is protected, encrypted, stored in a particular jurisdiction if those happen to be the requirements of the day. Next slide. One of my colleagues has actually mapped out the different types of cloud services available in the market, everything from multi-tenant software as a service to some of the managed cloud services that we see many of the major vendors offering today. So understanding your use cases, the kinds of applications that you rely upon, it's easy to make the decision to understand what model is appropriate for you. Next slide. We do, however, see that when it comes to moving to cloud services, it's really not just a question of cost. We do find that many customers make the assumption that a move to cloud services, is a long-term cost savings play. And while in many cases that's true, that's often not the top set of benefits that organizations are gleaning from a move to cloud services. Where customers are also recognizing value is in things like improved agility, so much more flexible way of working, because the overhead of the onerous administration of some of the underlying foundational technologies is not necessarily their problem anymore. They've been able to work with a vendor to manage some of that infrastructure, so they can move much more quickly when it comes to updates and when it comes to new applications built on the core systems. Also, just speed of deployment and implementation, knowing that, again, some of the burden of all of the test environments is been outsourced to a vendor environment. And often this facilitates better ease of information sharing and easier collaboration with external parties. Next slide. So when it comes to enterprise content management, we actually think that the market for cloud services is going to hit a bit of a tipping point over the next 2 years or so. This data is coming from our overall software survey, so surveying almost 2,000 technology decision makers. We see that about 18% of organizations have replaced their on-premises ECM systems with software as a service, but that we see kind of the bulk of the interest will be coming in about 2 years' time. So for example, 27% think that they'll be replacing most of their on-premises systems with cloud in about 2 years. But we also see that there's a lot of opportunity for complement. So for organizations perhaps that are spinning up a new content application and don't want to implement on-premise, but perhaps have no interest in moving their existing systems, complementing their existing investment with a cloud service also makes sense. Next slide. We do, however, see that there are lingering concerns, and we do encourage our customers to work with their security teams to learn how to ask the right questions when assessing a cloud vendor. We've been doing an annual survey with the industry association ARMA, Records and Information Management Nonprofit Association, and we've been asking that audience over the last several years, so what is your interest in using cloud for things like your business records? And we do find that there is, in some of these risk-averse roles, a hesitant to look at cloud services with a potential fear because of privacy or security concerns. That's the #1 area of resistance when it comes to looking at cloud services at 42%. But it's interesting that they're really focusing on the potential rather than the reality. 19% have any kind of inhibition because of specific laws or regulations. And we do find that year over year, the number of records and information management decision makers that are concerned about cloud privacy or security is on the decline. So this is an area where education, we're asking the right questions, understanding what a security officer should be looking for when assessing a cloud provider. We do find that education is certainly starting to turn around interest and acceptance of cloud services here. And I would say that over the last several years, the tone of the question I get when customers are asking about the fit of cloud services for things like their business records, certainly the questions are becoming a lot more sophisticated, and the understanding of how to assess the security profile is becoming much more top of mind. Next slide. We also see that organizations are starting to rethink some of their business cases for enterprise content management. So just over half of our surveyed decision makers in this year said that they plan to rethink their business case for enterprise content management. Next slide. And in fact, some of the objectives and outcomes that people are hoping for from their ECM investments are beginning to shift as well. So we also asked the follow-up question, so what business objectives will drive this updated business case? And really interesting to see that outcomes related to customer experience were in fact top of the list, followed closely by improved knowledge sharing across the enterprise, and then of course to reduce storage and clean up obsolete content. So we do see that as organizations are rethinking their business case for ECM, they're looking at new objectives. This is also opening the door to reconsidering cloud services as well. Next slide. So just to wrap up and summarize, and then I'll hand it over to Toby with IBM. One of the key areas that we talk about when we're thinking about enterprise content management, of course, is to make sure that the governance around all of that sensitive content, that important intellectual property, that valuable customer information is being protected and preserved. And I get quite a number of inquiries with our enterprise customers about thinking about their information governance strategy. How does that change, or what do we need to think about as they start to consider cloud services? And we do recommend that they take what we call an outside-in perspective and understand, so when you're applying things like security policies, retention policies, access controls to this information, how to find that right balance between locking down things that could be sensitive, that could be damaging if lost or breached, with the importance of keeping that information available to those business stakeholders who need it to make better decisions and to better serve their customers. So when we talk about taking an outside-in perspective on information governance, it really means drawing that line of sight from that external stakeholder, like a customer, like a partner, a business supplier, or even the regulators, if we're talking insurance and financial services, and understand what are their expectations in terms of how content and data is being preserved? How is it being protected? How is it being securely disposed of when we come to the end of an agreement? And of course, how can I use that content to answer questions quickly and serve my requirements in a timely and accurate fashion? So sometimes when organizations are trying to figure out, well, where do I begin with some of this governance around the content that we're storing, that outside-in perspective helps bring clarity and set priorities. So with that, I'll go to the next slide. So just to kind of wrap up what it means here, we do see that new use cases are pushing the boundaries of enterprise content, and often now that means working with external stakeholders as key participants in content and process scenarios. It also means that we need to start thinking about enterprise content in the context of mobile, and how are we actually being able to consume and use that information at that moment when we need to make a decision, approve a task, or review something as we walk into a meeting. It also means that we need to think about being more agile as we shift our processes and policies, and as we adopt new technologies that help us be more flexible and responsive to changing market conditions. And very often, cloud is going to be an enabler of this additional flexibility and agility. And then, of course, because many of us work in regulated industries, understanding the governance and compliance requirements that persist, in fact, may even become more complex in the world of cloud and mobile. Really understanding your requirements based on your industry, your jurisdiction, and of course, your customer experience requirements. So thank you very much. Thanks for your patience during the short delay getting started, and I'll turn it over to Toby with IBM.
Thank you, Cheryl. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to join this discussion today. Cheryl, a lot of interesting ideas there. I have been an ECM evangelist for almost 30 years, and a few things come to mind. The first is that you wrote research just last year about the conversion of ECM as a suite marketplace toward business content services. We're atomizing the component capabilities, making them available in the cloud. So when we talk about ECM in the cloud, we want to explain to people that there are capabilities that are critical that constitute collectively ECM, or just in pieces, parts represent ECM too. So as we carry the conversation forward, we want to make sure that people understand that if they need capture for mobile as part of their relationship with their agents or their insureds, there's actually a callable, composable capability toward that goal. So what's changing in the marketplace isn't just the hosting of ECM elsewhere, but more importantly, the componentization of ECM toward business value in lots of different ways. But the first thing I'd say is, look, ECM means, by definition, and Forrester and other analyst firms have confirmed this, so too as AIM, ARMA would as well, it's technology and it's strategy. And if you fail in strategy, you're likely to fail in technology. So your strategy just can't be, I'm going to buy some more ECM stuff. It has to be valid and valuable in a number of directions, including governance, but also including customer enablement and supporting those moments where information agility is equally important as the governance of that information. So everything has kind of a strategy behind it, and right now I think enterprises, if they're considering new investments and shifting the direction that they're taking with ECM, they need to have a focus on shared services. This is something that we've been advising IBM customers for years to do, is to set up a program, a center of excellence where people understand how to use these technologies, how to best leverage them toward business value on a repeated basis. So not to buy another version of an imaging or archiving or workflow, records management, governance, whatever capability, but to leverage one that's already being managed by people who understand it well and who can tell you the value of it in clear business terms. So this is a team sport. ECM is a team sport. You've got to have legal counsel, you've got to have technologists, you've got to have business leadership, you've got to have clear understanding of the business domain and the value proposition of change. And you're thinking both tactically and pragmatically and strategically, and considering things like cloud hosting and availability and mobile as being critical enablers toward the business value. So the first thing I want to remind people is that as we start to create componentized ECM and host it on the cloud, and we have hybrid content architectures, demystifying that and leveraging it best is going to require a center of excellence. On to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide? So what are content services? We call them business content services, as Cheryl did, because really this is ECM for the modern enterprise, and it's a platform that you can call, whether you're on-prem, whether you're cloud hosting, whether you're hybrid. You can actually access these independently or collectively toward a business goal. You'll note claims is right in the center of this. So if I'm managing a claims process, I'm going to need to archive, I'm going to need workflow, I'm going to need to understand information in context, a 360-degree view of the insured or the agent relationships, or I'm also going to need to access other information related to content objects. I'm going to be able to capture information from any source, not just from paper, but from faxes or inbound emails or social media, whatever. I want to be able to understand it better. And those analytics, I think, are becoming probably the key distinguishing differentiator for some of the leading platform players in ECM, adding analytics to all processes to better understand how fast, how beneficial, how much risk, how to protect things better. All of that now can be understood better by business analysts and leveraged by business leaders clearly and effectively. I believe that mobile is really the client for ECM, so I look at every device as being the screen real estate that I want to serve best. And I think that if we consider ECM to be future focused, it's going to have to go mobile. And you'll note as I set up some examples that we're going to show only mobile context. Collaboration, same story. Most of the processes were never optimized for moments of collaboration, and I believe that that is happening right now, and we're going to take advantage of it on behalf of our customers. And if you think of a process and you recognize an opportunity for fast collaboration, not via email or via FedEx folder or whatever, but instead something that happens almost immediately, it can really change the nature of the relationship with a customer, a partner, a supplier, a regulator. And obviously governing data and content has remained a critical component of a strategy that most of our ECM customers employ. But there are also new protections that you can add, new regulations you can address, and new ways of leveraging content in componentized form that actually makes compliance easier. Because if you can't comply, you really can't compete. On to the next slide. So we look at ECM as having already evolved, and it's interesting that Cheryl's research suggests that we're moving so fast. The market research, the vendors who deliver product, we're all working at peak capacity right now to keep up with demand for change in this marketplace. We started with systems of records years ago, capture, archive, governance, search and retrieve, all that stuff were proprietary platform architectures, and there were some leading vendors in this space long ago, and we've certainly been one at IBM. But we recognize that until you activate content, it's still pretty much cost and degree of difficulty and out of reach in a lot of cases of search engines and analytics. So we needed to move it up a step, and we moved toward the work management, the case management, the services-oriented architecture and connections to ERP and CRM and everything else. But more importantly, to be able to really understand the value of collaborating on content, the value of moving content into a mobile context, the 360-degree view of a customer. And it seems like that just happened, and yet we're moving on already to systems of insight, where we inject analytics services in cloud, mobile, and hybrid deployments, and we have composable cloud services for capture, or for case, or for archive, or for governance even, that we host on Bluemix. So we recognize that this is a moment where composable content capabilities are as important as all that history that we've worked through these many years. On to the next slide. So a composable application just means, look, here my ideal opportunity is to enable people in commercial real estate, let's say. I know this is an insurance call, I'll get to that in a minute, but here's a commercial real estate loan assessor, and she's going out and she's got a mobile device and she's got to review properties, and she's going to leverage a number of services to enable this mobile application to be built and leveraged best. And there's going to be huge business value in enabling this mobility with content. So we'll have cognitive services from Watson. We'll have content services like mobile capture, or the ability to reach into an archive or to reach an external third-party repository. We'll have the ability to actually take any form that's part of this process and idealize it so that they can scan it in the field, and it'll OCR directly on the device, and that data will immediately go into transactional systems through data services. And workflow services will orchestrate and idealize the relationship between the people, the process, and the content. And these composable applications will be developed by not IBM, but our partners like IPD. So the idea is to create a foundation, a platform, and a set of capabilities that can be mixed and matched most effectively to deliver immediate, mobile, composable business capabilities. On to the next slide. So we'll look at this in a number of different ways. And it won't just be IBM capabilities that we'll reach out to. So you're going to have loan documents or case documents or onboarding for insureds, and we're going to have a custom application that leverages something like Box as a content host and Twilio for messaging and some of these content services capabilities hosted on Bluemix. We'll store content in Box maybe temporarily, maybe for a longer duration, but we also might extract and validate documents and other information, send line items to other application databases immediately, and also connect this information into something that's a more regulated content repository. We'll use Case Manager to drive actions and assignments. We'll keep the entire audit history in the context of that claim or that loan application or whatever, and we'll store it so that it's available for review years later in exactly the same context as any agent, any lender, any customer actually saw in the first place. So that capability is part of what I consider to be the ideal governance story. On to the next slide, please. I'm only rushing because I want to make sure that IPD has an opportunity to express itself too, because I think really you're going to hear some interesting stuff from Jeff. So Jeff, take it away.
Thank you, Toby. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff Gerlach from IPD. IPD is a 25-year business partner of IBM, and we specialize at building and deploying these ECM solutions both on-prem and now on the cloud. And so one of the struggles that so many of we hear from our clients is, where do I start? How do I have all these capabilities available to me on-prem, on the cloud? And so this is really where a partner like IPD comes into play, and being able to leverage our experience of best practices, having done this before, and being able to show clients that path, that way forward. So if we take a look at this slide here, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the evolution and how we see ECM has matured, and then how we apply these benefits in a cloud environment. So ECM started as a back office function to archive content. However, ECM is quickly making its way to the front office, and organizations are using that as a strategic differentiator. The way that I like to say it is that this is not your father's ECM platform. So when you think of ECM, social media interactions with your clients, being able to pull that down and store that and make it an active piece of the case, and being able to enact on or be able to react and communicate with your members immediately are competitive differentiators. And so what we find is that organizations are challenged to be able to address this rapid pace of change and use it to their advantage immediately. Organizations that use actionable content are able to serve their customers and members more effectively. So if we just take a look at, we talked about, Cheryl made the reference to voicemail, email. Everyone's now using messaging because they want instant results. People want immediate results, and they want answers immediately. And being able to embrace that from a holistic perspective is what we're talking about here, as well as being able to communicate to your members in the channels in which they wish to communicate you is imperative. ECM provides the foundation to store all these interactions, all these communications, but the key here is being able to leverage this for your competitive advantage. From a deployment perspective, many of these ECM applications are simplified when you deploy on the cloud. So as Toby was referring to, composable applications. IPD has composed these applications based on the use cases that we see in the insurance and financial services industries. So things like claims, underwriting, complaints, intake, loan processing. So being able to pull these together that are completely composed, ready to use, really open up a whole new world for our clients. And so from a very high level perspective, the increased speed to market, the ability to adopt industry best practices, and then the ability to rapidly embrace new technology as these trends continue. If we just take a look at, from everyone out there has had the proliferation of SharePoint sites throughout their organization. And what that really tells us is that IT organizations are really not able to keep up with the demand of some of their clients. So by being able to look to cloud to have solutions that are pre-composed, ready to go, allows us to be able to break a lot of that logjam. So if you take a look from an increased speed to market perspective, not only let's think about this from the technology side for one moment, being able to have environments that are managed by service level agreement. So you don't have to worry about high availability. You don't have to worry about fault tolerance and scalability. That's handled through service level agreements that are out there. So no longer are we selecting hardware platforms or database vendors. We're engaged with the business talking about use cases that they need to serve their business. So we've seen this over and over again where business users grow frustrated with their current operations because IT does not have the budget to be able to embrace the requirements that they have, and being able to have these solutions that are composed on the cloud, ready to implement today, it really increases our speed to market. The other thing that we see is industry best practices. Being able to leverage use cases across from claims customers over and over and over again. IPD has a large install base throughout North America, and what we see are reoccurring themes or reoccurring patterns of how to solve claims, or how to underwrite an insurance application, or how to process a customer complaint. And by having all these capabilities pre-composed on the cloud, available for use, allows you to benefit from what some of the competitors or what some of your competitors are doing. Because we see competitors at all sorts of industry conferences trying to share best practices and being able to learn what works well for them. Yeah, there are competitive differentiators that that people try not to share as much, but there's so much out there that's already available, so you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. And what this really allows us to do is bring these applications from the back office, where I was talking before, where ECM services are available or used to be available to scan back file scanning and whatnot, where they're really available now for your end users that are on the front line talking with your customers. The next one is being able to rapidly embrace ECM technologies. So while these ECM services are available on the cloud, they do benefit from regularly scheduled updates. And by having all those new features, functions, and capabilities available on a regular basis allows you to adapt and allows you to change much quicker based on regulations, based on customer inputs, or as technology as it continues to evolve over time. So many times we've seen that ECM platforms don't get upgraded until we reach some type of end of life or some type of critical situation, and then that just serves to do an upgrade. It really doesn't serve itself to being able to embrace this new technology. So I think when we look at it from the cloud perspective, being able to take this on, or being able to put this burden of adopting new releases through a service level agreement that's continually available to us on the cloud is a huge differentiator. So just kind of in summary, the value proposition of leveraging the cloud are compelling and will only continue to become more compelling over time and we believe that this will enable businesses to remain agile, competitive over the long term.
Thanks, Jeff. We're going to go ahead and take some questions now. If you do have questions and haven't submitted them, please go ahead and do so right now. I do have one that came in at the beginning of the presentation. The first question is, does IBM shared services methodology incorporate a hybrid architecture? Toby, I think that's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. I mean, again, I think that almost every ECM implementation that exists is already moving toward hybrid because there are external sources of content and collaboration that they want to encompass. Furthermore, I think that the relationship between ECM and other systems has already been pretty clearly drawn. But if you haven't connected up a full line of business redraw, leveraging ECM appropriately for something like claims handling, now's the time to do it because you're going to want to have that become much, much more dynamic and digital than it was in the past. So the shared services methodology and the design of the program, which, by the way, is something that you can get. It's a services engagement. IBM has it. Others have it too. But the idea is to set up a program where a center of excellence is created that aligns IT with business leadership, with line of business leadership, actually takes into account governance and everything else, and it's a multi-step program. But the value of it gets proven very, very quickly. So the answer is, yeah, it's actually designed to help move toward hybrid and also to help leverage business content services that are cloud hosted most effectively and avoid duplication and the complexities of a lot of redundant work that people will do if they're left to their own devices. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Yep.
Thanks, Toby. Another question that just came in are there any disadvantages to choosing whether to go on-prem versus maybe just going hybrid or going full cloud?
All of us probably have an opinion about that. I mean, we've had a lot of isolated ECM for many, many years, and my suspicion is that insurers are not going to be really served well by isolated systems. You're going to have to make them digital, you're going to have to make them dynamic, and you're going to have to connect to other cloud services and hosts if you want to remain competitive. So for competitive reasons specifically, not so much for governance reasons, but I'm a big fan of balancing risk and reward as much as possible, I would definitely say isolated on-prem is riskier and more expensive to the business than opening up toward hybrid or cloud.
Yeah, Toby, this is Jeff. I'll chime in on that as well. From what we're seeing from an implementation perspective is nobody is taking, hundreds of millions of images and just putting them on the cloud for the heck of it. Our customers look to us and say, gee, we're overwhelmed. Where do we start? And what we look for are smaller applications that may only have limited integration points so they can cut their teeth and get oriented with it before they move on to the next phase of creating more complex hybrid environments that are delivering higher value. So, we do suggest that, before you don't want to boil the ocean on here, but to your earlier point, having the overall strategy and then being able to execute methodically on that strategy. Here's where I start, get some wins under your belt, and then continue to expand it as time goes on.
Yeah, there are a lot of references about case studies and customer stories, and Forrester collects those, IBM collects those, IPD probably collects those too. Those proof points are the starting point for a tactical drive toward one or another quick win. So quick wins are incredibly valuable to gain the trust of business leadership. And if they've got a pain point, like they want to engage their insureds more effectively and certainly faster, because a competitor's doing it, use that driver as part of your ECM strategy.
Thanks, Toby. And let's see, another question that just came through is referencing what Cheryl had to say, that more than half of the firms are rethinking ECM and maybe trying to make that move over the next 12 months. And the question is, where is a good place to start if you're just starting fresh?
Yeah, great point.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, so I think if you're looking at starting fresh, I mean, aligning the objectives. What are you trying to accomplish with your ECM investment to, what are the driving concerns in your key line of business? If it's expanding revenue growth, if it's serving a new set of customers, if it's launching into a new geography, acquiring a competitor. I mean, really looking at, where are the content and process opportunities tied to, what matters most to your business, and looking for opportunities to jump quickly into funded programs and initiatives.
The other thing I'd say is that insurance has traditionally been highly dependent upon large-scale transactional back-office ECM systems. And I wouldn't want to abandon processes that are well served by that setup. So thinking fresh may mean adding to an existing set of capabilities with new ones that allow dynamic relationships with customers or agents, whatever it is, right? So my feeling is that that's why this is a strategy moment, even more than a technology one. But because there's so much value in leveraging these new cloud-hosted capabilities and having a hybrid relationship between those and the on-premise platform that will continue to keep the lights running and serve certain processes very well, I'd want to have a strategy that had jumping off points, quick wins, whatever. And that's what IPD was talking about a minute ago, is that there are certain things that we know are industry-wide now, urges toward better customer engagement, better agent relationships, better access to content on mobile devices, whatever those are. Let's create a strategy that doesn't necessarily buy a whole bunch of brand new technology, but actually leverages the connection to the on-premise technology that's already serving them well, and existing investments probably will pay off again and again. New ones are going to take a little while.
Those are all the questions that we have for today, and that concludes our presentation. Our recorded version of the presentation will be available on IPD's website and via IBM's ECM Media Hub, and we will be sending out an email following this to all attendees to link to that recorded webinar. So on behalf of IPD, I'd like to thank Cheryl, Toby, and Jeff for their insightful presentation and time today. And finally, I'd like to thank all the participants for taking an hour out of their afternoon to attend. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.